everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. Simon here. So tonight, we have two episodes sent in by viewers. The first one sent in by someone from Hong Kong. Let's call her Lauren. So Lauren reached out to me after watching one of my past episodes. It was the one called These Are Not Guardian Angels, because she had a very similar experience in her own life. As always, after the story, let's break Lauren's experience down from a Chinese cultural perspective to see if we can figure out exactly what happened to her. So let's turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into this first one. So the climax of this incident happened to Lauren a couple of years ago, but the origin of the story began way before that. Now, Lauren's never really been a believer of the supernatural, but this experience has changed her perception on all of that. To better understand how she got into the situation, we have to travel back about 15 years to when she was just 20 years old. At the time, Lauren had been seriously dating her boyfriend for about 3 years. Things were going incredibly well. They were deeply in love, and life was amazing. They had massive plans for the future, like graduating college, landing high-paying jobs, and starting a family with 2 or 3 kids. They even planned to make enough money to fully support their parents so that they wouldn't have to work anymore. Wholesome, beautiful dreams that many of us have. But on one random Saturday night, everything fell apart. Lauren and her boyfriend had plans to watch a movie at 7 p.m. that night. He was supposed to pick her up on his motorcycle. She dolled herself up, put on her favorite outfit, and waited for him to arrive. 7 p.m. rolled around. No one. 7:20 p.m. Still, no sign of him. Lauren called his cell phone multiple times, but it all went straight to voicemail. As Lauren would later learn, her boyfriend never made it. He had been speeding on the highway to get to her, lost control of his motorcycle, and crashed into a taxi. The taxi driver walked away with minor injuries, but Lauren's boyfriend? He died upon impact. Lauren was devastated. In a matter of seconds, her entire world was flipped upside down, and her future completely collapsed. She was never the same again. After the funeral, the grief was paralyzing. Her grades plummeted, and she eventually dropped out of college altogether. She got into a massive argument with her parents over this decision, but honestly, she didn't care. Instead, she spent her days at her boyfriend's grave. Sometimes, she would just sit next to his tombstone for hours on end. Eventually, she even started sneaking into the cemetery at night, falling asleep leaning against the cold stone, and spending the whole night there. Looking back now, Lauren admits that she was in a terrible mental state. It was dangerous and deeply unhealthy. She also confessed that she had frequent thoughts of ending her own life during this dark period. But she's extremely grateful now that she never went through with them. Slowly, time began to pass. Weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. Little by little, the pain started to dull. Lauren began picking up the pieces of her life. The dark thoughts were less frequent, and her visits to the cemetery became less frequent as well. She never went back to college, but she did manage to get by working various odd jobs. But as hard as Lauren tried, she could never fully move on. She desperately wanted to feel like her normal self again, but there was always this strange, unexplained weight dragging her down. Even though she was open to finding love again and went on a few dates over the years, a new relationship just never materialized. As the years progressed, her life was just alright. Not bad, but not good either. Just okay. But then, she started noticing strange physical symptoms. She began suffering from chronic, unexplainable brain fog, persistent fatigue, and a heavy cloud that never seemed to go away. Lauren describes it as never feeling fully present in the moment. and it was getting worse. She went to get physical checkups every single year, but the doctors always told her the exact same thing. Everything was fine. She was perfectly healthy. Lauren didn't know who else to turn to, so she just tried to ride it out, hoping that it would eventually go away on its own. But it didn't. It would just keep getting worse. She would wake up completely exhausted, even if she had gone to bed early the night before. She felt perpetually out of it, and soon, things escalated to a point where Lauren could no longer ignore that this might be something paranormal. The turning point happened when Lauren took a job at a high-end beauty clinic. It was a small, intimate office with just 4 employees, including herself, catering mostly to women seeking expensive facial procedures. Male clients were pretty rare. But soon, terrifying anomalies started happening after hours. Not to Lauren, but to her coworkers. Completely independent of one another, the staff began seeing things. It always happened right after closing time, when the main lights were dimmed and the treatment rooms were empty. Staff members would be cleaning up, only to freeze in their tracks. Gliding seamlessly, they would clearly see the distinct figure of a man. This entity would drift down the narrow corridors of the clinic before vanishing into thin air. At first, the coworkers kept it to themselves, fearing they were just tired and seeing things. But eventually, they started talking. "I saw that man again," one whispered. Another coworker turned completely pale and admitted that they'd seen him too. It became an open, terrifying secret among the staff that the clinic was haunted by a man who only came out when the building was quiet. At this point, Lauren was the only one who had not seen him yet. But that would not last for long. One night, Lauren was off from work. She was just chilling at home, alone, watching a movie in the living room, when she dozed off on the couch. But as she slept, it didn't feel like sleep at all. It was either a state of sleep paralysis or an incredibly vivid nightmare. In the dream, she was lying on her couch, exactly as she was in real life. But then, she noticed a strange man standing near the bathroom. She watched in horror as he slowly crept over to the couch. He leaned over and literally wrapped his arms and legs around her body, exactly like how an infant clings to its mother. Then, he buried his face into her neck, settling in comfortably. Lauren had never seen this man before in her life. She woke up with a violent jolt. But again, it didn't feel like she had been sleeping. It was the strangest sensation. She scanned her apartment, but it was empty. When she moved her neck to stretch, her upper body felt incredibly tight and heavy. Something felt really wrong. Terrified by the nightmares, she made up her mind. Tomorrow, she was going to visit a Taoist priest. Lauren had never been superstitious or spiritual, but modern medicine had failed her. Why not give the spiritual route a shot? That night, after making her decision, she went to bed. And that's when she had another nightmare. This one was far more aggressive. She dreamt of the exact same man, but this time, he was inside her bedroom, and he was absolutely furious. He appeared to be in his late 40s or so, wearing tattered old clothing that reminded her of something a village farmer would wear. This mystery man was livid. He didn't speak. His facial expressions radiated pure rage. He approached her bed, and suddenly his facial features dissolved. He turned into a pitch-black shadow. The shadow pinned her down, restraining her arms and legs, desperately trying to keep her from leaving. Lauren was terrified, but mid-panic, she realized she was dreaming. She fought with everything she had, trying to force her physical body to move. After what felt like hours of struggling, she finally jolted herself awake, snapping out of this nightmare. The next morning, Lauren went straight to the local temple. The master there was a Taoist priest in his 80s, hunched over, with his eyes half closed from age. Lauren felt a bit skeptical seeing how frail he was, but since she was already here, she sat down from across him. Before she could even open her mouth to explain her situation, the old master tilted his head up, looked her in the eye, and spoke. "Young lady, why did it take you so long to come seek help?" Lauren was stunned. What did he mean? The master grabbed a piece of blank yellow paper and began drawing a talisman. His hands were shaky from old age, but his movements were incredibly methodical, like he had done this 1,000 times before. As he drew, he said, "Young lady, did you not feel something off with your body until now? This one's been attached to you for many years already. I'm surprised he was able to latch on for so long without you noticing." He let out a little chuckle, revealing a smile with only a few teeth left. "Come, girl, let me sort this out for you. This one isn't aggressive." He motioned for her to step around the table. The master performed a complex energetic clearing ritual to shift the frequencies and sever the bond. He spoke directly to the spirit, helping the trapped consciousness finally realize and accept its own death, guiding it to cross over where it truly belonged. Afterwards, the master explained what he saw. The entity attached to Lauren had been with her for over a decade. It was the spirit of a man who had died incredibly suddenly years ago. Because his death was so abrupt, his wandering consciousness failed to comprehend that his physical life was already over. Instead of moving on, he became stuck, drifting aimlessly on Earth. Eventually, he crossed paths with Lauren. The master explained that spirits are naturally drawn to living humans who emit a specific frequency they crave. The spirit must have found an opening, latched onto her, and never left. He wasn't malicious. He was a wandering soul, looking for comfort and shelter. He had been quietly shadowing her, tethered to her energetic field all this time. The ritual took about half an hour. When it was finished, the master handed Lauren a protective talisman and told her to keep it on her at all times for protection. The results were almost instantaneous. The very next morning, Lauren woke up feeling lighter than she had in over 10 years. The chronic brain fog completely dissolved, and her vibrant, healthy energy finally returned. And back at the clinic, the terrifying manifestations stopped entirely. So, Hong Kong horror family, what do you think happened here? Lauren believes that the spirit must have latched onto her sometime during the period where she was grieving the loss of her boyfriend. What do you think though? Please, pause the video here and let Lauren know your thoughts in the comments below. Alright, so what do I think happened here to Lauren from a Chinese cultural perspective? There's a lot going on in this story, and Lauren's experience is actually very similar to this woman named Anna in my other episode called These Are Not Guardian Angels. For those of you who didn't watch that episode yet, definitely check it out because there are some similarities here, but I don't believe it was the exact type of spirit here in Lauren's situation. In my opinion, the spirit that was attached to Lauren is something called a Yi Fu Ling. Yi means to rely upon or to lean on, and Fu means to attach oneself. So a Yi Fu Ling literally translates to a spirit that relies upon and attaches itself to something. They're in the category of attachment spirits or clinging souls. These are not your classic ghosts that you normally see in movies. These spirits actually turn living humans into their homes. The spirit wasn't haunting her apartment or the clinic. It was haunting her. I think that her coworkers simply caught glimpses of the passenger she carried around with her. This is very different from the Western idea of demonic possession. in my culture, these types of spirits are not trying to conquer or control someone, but rather, it's trying to survive and exist. Taoist and folk practitioners describe these spirits as almost like parasites. They're no longer fully part of the world of the living, but they're also not fully participating in the next stage of existence either. They're stuck, so it leads them to begin seeking anchors. Anchors can be a bunch of different things, from people to objects. I personally think this whole thing started years ago, after Lauren's boyfriend passed away. Lauren's entire emotional world collapsed. For months and years afterwards, she was consumed by grief. She spent a ton of time around the cemetery to sit by her boyfriend's grave, even sleeping next to it at times, constantly thinking about death herself. This is a big no-no in my culture. I'm by no means saying that grieving is wrong. The issue here was that Lauren was gradually aligning her emotional state with the realm of the dead. Lauren is physically alive, but psychologically and emotionally, she was dwelling among the dead. She did this consistently for an extended period of time. Her boundary between the living world and the spirit world became unusually thin during this period in her life. I think that at some point during this period, the spirit found an opening and was able to slip into Lauren's life. So, how does this happen? Imagine a room filled with bright lights. Then, all of a sudden, one of the lights dims drastically compared to the others. This is easy to notice, right? This is most likely what the spirit saw too. Spirits notice when a person is weakened, not because it's necessarily hunting or looking for this. It's just that this person comes into view for them. So, the crazy part of the story is that the spirit remained undetected for over a decade. Now, a lot of what Lauren described are real symptoms that people in similar situations have experienced. Usually, it's fatigue, brain fog, a feeling of heaviness, emotional stagnation, and the inability to fully move on from negative emotions. There's actually a reason for this. Many Taoist practitioners describe these attached spirits as creating a ho-hei, or energy depletion. The spirit doesn't absorb Lauren's energy intentionally, but its mere presence creates a constant slow drain. Think of Lauren like wearing a backpack that weighs maybe 5 pounds. 5 pounds is not that heavy, right? But think about her carrying this 5-pound bag for years and years. Eventually, she forgets what it feels like to walk out without it. It's a similar concept with the spirit latched to her. She eventually accepts the exhaustion as normal, because she doesn't remember how it feels anymore to not be exhausted. Now, let's shift over to the nightmares, as things become more revealing here. The spirit is finally seen by Lauren as it wraps itself around her. Some people might interpret this as sexual, but I don't believe so. I think the spirit is behaving more like a dependent child, clinging to her and nestling against her neck. It's seeking contact and warmth. It doesn't do anything else but this. It never once threatens or injures Lauren. This looks to me less a situation of predation and more like dependency. The spirit has likely become accustomed to Lauren's yang energy after all of these years, to the point where it may no longer know how to exist independently anymore. This is why he was so angry in that second nightmare. It knew that she wanted to go see a Taoist priest, and he did not want that. The reason why these Yifuling are so successful in laying dormant and going undetected is because they're not obvious compared to other types of spirits. When you think of a haunting, you probably imagine things like apparitions, voices, objects moving, possessions, and just terrifying encounters in general, right? Well, for the most part, Yifuling do not normally do any of these. Their main goal is not interaction or attention. It's quite the opposite. It's a long-term attachment. I would describe them as someone who secretly sleeps in another person's house. As long as the house remains warm and comfortable, there's no reason for them to cause a scene, which is why it's not unusual for them to remain undetected for decades or even longer. Even though Lauren did have some symptoms, like brain fog and exhaustion, they're not obvious, and they're things that can be easily explained away as normal symptoms associated with many normal everyday things like stress. These types of spirits also don't become visible until one of three things happen. Number 1, the spirit gets stronger. This is called 阳性黑号, which translates to developing into a substantial force. The spirit remains attached for so long that eventually, over time, its presence becomes more noticeable. This is when strange dreams and sightings begin, as well as other paranormal events. Number 2, the host gets weaker. In some situations, the spirit may not have changed at all, but instead, the person gets weaker. I think this is what's happening in Lauren's situation. The spirit's been attached to her for so long, draining her constantly, that she was getting weaker by the day, increasing her sensitivity to the spirit world. And finally, 3, separation becomes imminent. This is also present in Lauren's case. Many other separate cases like this one describe a sudden increase in paranormal activity right before the attachment ends. Practitioners interpret this as the spirit knowing that its connection is about to be severed, so they choose to reveal themselves as a last resort attempt to stop what's to come. One important thing to know about Yifuling is that they're usually neither good nor evil. Unlike a vengeful ghost that's hostile, a Yifuling occupies the middle ground. It may genuinely like the host or feel comforted by them. They don't want to harm them, but simply by remaining attached, it will slowly drain their host's vitality and keep both parties stuck. We describe these cases as a tragic relationship because the living person can't fully live and the spirit can't fully move on. Both are quietly preventing the other from progressing. So the next time any of you feel like something might be off, you could be right. Most people fear the dramatic spirits, the vengeful ghosts, the terrifying apparitions, the entities that openly make their presence known. But don't forget about the ones that don't want to make their presence known. They're less scary, but it doesn't mean that they're any less dangerous. Yifuling are still dangerous to your health as they play the long game. They slowly sap you. So please, be safe out there, Hong Kong horror family. Stay connected to the living. Spend time with family and friends. Take care of your physical as well as your mental health. Though it's easier said than done, try not to dwell too much on death, grief, or the past. Cherish the memories of the ones you've lost, but do not let grief become a home that neither you or something else can never leave. Alright, so this next story is also from Hong Kong. Shared by a viewer, let's call her Lily. And she had a pretty terrifying experience with her boyfriend years ago that she wanted me to turn into a full story. It's about how her boyfriend did something incredibly risky. He tried to self-learn the process of hypnotizing himself to unlock memories from a past life. As you might expect, this went very wrong very quickly. Alright, let's dive into this one. The humidity in the cramped Samsoibo apartment was suffocating. For 3 years, Lily and Ken had shared this rundown shoebox of an apartment. It wasn't in the best part of town, but rent was cheap, and it was really all they could afford at the time. Lily worked as a cashier at a major convenience store chain, and Ken worked as a teller at a large bank. Money was tight, but they had big dreams, and they tried to save whatever they could, a task that was much easier said than done in a city as expensive as Hong Kong. Ken was a kind man. He's the kind of man who would carefully scoop a spider into a cup to release it outside. He spoke softly, always remembered anniversaries, and never raised his voice, even when the crushing stress of the city weighed heavily on them. He was also incredibly hardworking, constantly taking on extra responsibilities. Yet, despite all his dedication, he has been stuck in the same position for 5 years. He was constantly passed over for promotions to the point where even the intern he trained was now earning even more than him. It felt like his financial luck was completely cursed. Whenever he tried to invest in the stock market, the tickers he chose plummeted. Whenever he tried selling items online for extra cash, he would either be stood up or scammed outright. Everything he touched regarding money turned to dust. He spent his evenings scouring the internet for unique ways to turn his luck around. That's when he stumbled down a late-night rabbit hole into spiritual theories. One post on a fringe forum caught his eye. Current blockages in your life are the shadows of past life sins. The theory suggested that untethered karmic debt could anchor a person's fortune, drowning them in bad luck. Ken was fascinated. Unwilling to spend money on an experienced regression specialist, he downloaded a bootleg audio file from a highly questionable source. When Ken shared his plan with Lily, she immediately had a bad feeling about this. She begged him not to do it, terrified that it was just another scam. "It's free. I'm just gonna listen to it, okay?" Ken told her, slipping on his noise-canceling headphones. "It's just a guided meditation." Lily rolled her eyes and left him sitting cross-legged on the floor, the pale glow of the laptop screen washing over his face. It was a Saturday afternoon, and she just wanted to relax. She went to the kitchen, boiled some water, and settled in with a cup of tea, a face mask, and a good book. About an hour passed in complete silence. Feeling a bit uneasy, Lily decided to go check on Ken. To her surprise, Ken was no longer sitting on the floor. He was now standing dead center in the bedroom facing the window, his back to her. His headphones lay discarded on the ground. "Ken?" she whispered softly. He turned around and Lily dropped her mug. The ceramic shattered, splashing scalding hot tea across her ankles. But she didn't even feel it. The man she was looking at was not Ken. He wore Ken's face, but the soft, gentle eyes she loved were gone. In their place were wide, bloodshot, feral eyes staring her down from a hunched, predatory posture. He lunged. There was no hesitation, no flicker of recognition. He grabbed her by her throat, slamming her hard against the thin apartment wall. "Where is it?" he snarled. His voice was completely unrecognizable, deep, rough, and dripping with malice. It was the voice of a stranger. "Where is the cash? Give me the cash. I know you're hiding it in here somewhere." Lily choked, kicking wildly in a total panic. She managed to drive her knees squarely into his stomach. It didn't even seem to cause him any pain, but it surprised him enough to loosen his grip. Lily slipped free, scrambled out the front door, and fled into the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs. Ken didn't chase her. Instead, through the open door, she could hear the terrifying sounds of furniture being smashed and a man screaming in pure rage. Lily didn't call the police. Deep in her bones, she knew this wasn't a psychotic break. It was something the authorities couldn't fix. Instead, she called her deeply superstitious mother, who immediately gave her the number of a powerful local medium. When Lily called, the medium instructed her to bring Ken over immediately. Terrified, but not wanting to abandon the man she loved, Lily tiptoed back to her apartment. Through the front gate, she saw total devastation. Cabinets were ripped open, drawers were emptied, and the furniture was flipped. She opened the door as quietly as possible. Ken wasn't in the living room. She crept toward the bedroom and found him sitting calmly on the edge of the mattress, staring blankly out the window. The rage was gone, replaced by a hollow, distant trance. "Hey, babe, what's wrong? Are you feeling better now?" Lily whispered. Ken didn't respond. He just kept staring. When Lily asked again, he let out a low, agreeable hum, but his eyes never met hers. Yeah, he said. "Honey, can you get up for me? I want you to come somewhere with me," she pleaded. She reached out and gently took his hand. He finally looked at her, but he seemed a million miles away. Oh, okay, sure," he replied emotionlessly. Lily helped him with his shoes and practically guided him out the door. Luckily, the medium lived nearby on the 6th floor of a rundown public housing estate. They called her Master Chu. She was a petite woman in her 60s who looked like any ordinary Hong Kong granny you would see haggling at the wet market. But the moment they stepped inside her apartment, heavy with the thick scent of incense and lined with fierce-looking Taoist deities, the atmosphere shifted. Master Chu took one look at Ken and immediately lit 3 sticks of incense. "Ay-ya," he opened the door. "He didn't know how to close it," she said, her voice dry and serious. He invited memories in. These memories are his own, but not from this lifetime. She instructed Ken to lie down on a bamboo mat in the center of the room. There are no bootleg audio tracks here. Striking a metal singing bowl, Master Chu began chanting as the thick incense smoke curled around Ken's face. His entire body went rigid. "Who are you?" Master Chu demanded. Ken's face contorted into that same feral sneer. "It's my money," he roared. Through Master Chu's intense, heavily guided regression, she finally told Lily what was going on. Generations ago, Ken's soul had belonged to a ruthless grave robber. For years, he had amassed stolen wealth from the dead, but eventually, his greed caught up with them. He desecrated a grave of a powerful gang leader, but when the gang found out, they hunted him down, reclaimed the stolen gold, and violently murdered him. "Your current poverty is the universe balancing the scales," Master Chu explained to a trembling Lily. "His soul is paying for the greed of his past, and by doing that hypnosis without spiritual protection, he bypassed the veil and pulled the violent persona directly into his present mind. Banishing a past life is not a simple exorcism." Master Chu worked relentlessly for 3 hours. She burned 3 stacks of joss paper in a brass basin, symbolically paying off the grave robber's victims in the spirit realm. As the ritual reached its climax, Ken, he retched over a bucket, expelling a thick black bile before immediately collapsing into a deep, silent sleep. When Ken finally woke up, he groggily looked at the old woman, to Lily. His eyes locked onto the dark bruises forming on Lily's neck, and he instantly began to cry. His gentle, empathetic nature was fully restored. The ritual worked. After this, life slowly returned to normal for the couple. But their fortunes didn't miraculously transform overnight. The crushing weight of bad luck had clearly lifted. Ken eventually found a better paying job at a new company, and so did Lily. They were never rolling in wealth, but after surviving the horrors of that Saturday afternoon, they didn't care. They were safe, they were healthy, and they had each other. So, Hong Kong Horror Family, what do you think happened here to Lily? Please, pause the video here and let her know what you think happened in the comments below. Alright, so what do I personally think about this one? This is an interesting situation because there are so many different angles to look at the story from, based on what we're provided from Lily. But based on what she shares with us here, I don't know if I would honestly say that the spirit that entered Ken were just past life memories. Why do I feel this way? Well, if we assume that Ken genuinely accessed a past life personality, we would normally expect much more than a single emotion to emerge. A complete human being is incredibly complex. We all have different fears, regrets, ambitions, etc. But what appeared through Ken wasn't acting like a complete being. It seemed to revolve around rage and possession. If this was a true past life memory, why did it not have any other emotions or questions, such as who his killers were or where is his family? This fixation on where the money is, even after death, has me leaning toward a different theory, that something else entirely had entered Ken, most likely a separate spirit that was in the area, that found an opening to Ken when he was playing around with trying to open random doors. I personally think that this situation revolves more around the concept we call 잡님, an obsession so powerful that it survives death. In many Chinese ghost stories from folklore, there's one thing in common across many of them. A spirit gradually loses most of its humanity, and what remains is not a full personality. Usually, all that remains is a single overwhelming desire. For example, a murdered spirit seeking revenge may no longer remember most of its life. It'll only remember the person who killed them. A hungry ghost may no longer remember its family over time, but it'll always remember hunger. A greedy spirit may no longer remember its entire life story, but it'll always remember money. So I think what emerged through Ken looks less like a complete reincarnated personality, and more like a fragment dominated by greed. When Master Chu asked Ken who he was, the entity didn't answer. If a complete personality emerged, we would expect a conversation where Ken would have answered more coherently rather than just saying, "It's my money." This, to me, is much closer to how we would describe an obsessive spirit rather than how we would describe a fully intact human consciousness. So, there are three possibilities that I could think of for Lily's case. Number 1, a full past life personality emerged. This is possible, but I think it's highly unlikely based on how Ken acted. Number 2, a fragment of Ken's own former incarnation emerged, specifically the greedy portion of that former self. This is slightly more likely than option 1. And then, there's the third possibility, that this was an unrelated attachment spirit altogether. A wandering spirit that latched onto Ken. I believe option 3 is the most likely option, because the more one-dimensional a spirit appears, the more likely they are to be a spiritual fragment rather than a fully conscious soul. Now, I'm by no means saying that Master Chu was wrong. Not at all. Because if you present this case to different practitioners, you're going to receive different answers. Master Chu could be interpreting the situation through her own spiritual framework. It's important to understand that Chinese spiritual mediums, Taoist practitioners, and Buddhist practitioners often do not view all spiritual phenomena the same way. Also, you have to remember that we are trying our best to come up with a conclusion of what happened here based on what we are told from Lily. We most likely do not have 100% of the picture. So, if you ask a skeptical Taoist medium what they think, they might say something like, "How do we know whatever entered Ken wasn't an attachment spirit pretending to be a past life?" A lot of spirits that are stronger in nature can lie and impersonate. Not everything spoken by spirits is the truth. Thank you everyone for making it to the end of this week's episode. Stay safe, and we'll speak again next week.